13 siblings were allegedly held captive by their parents. From the outside, it looked like any other house on the block. But inside, one can see the deplorable conditions endured by the youngsters before they were rescued 1 year ago. Now, Inside Edition's Diane McInerney has been given exclusive access to the home.
This suburban home is the House of Horrors, where 13 brothers and sisters were found imprisoned. David Turpin and his wife Louise allegedly kept their children shackled, half-starved, and living in squalid conditions.
We're about to take you inside the Turpin home, where the 13 children were being held captive.
Diane McInerney was given exclusive access inside the House of Horrors for the first time, 1 year after the siblings were freed. What she found is disturbing.
This bedroom right here is one of the rooms where police say they found the children shackled to these beds. And when you see all the toys, you see all these toys. I mean, there were 13 kids living here, ranging in age from 2 years old and up. And it is so sad to see that there were such young children here being held like they were animals. When first responders arrived on the scene, there was just tons of garbage. And there's this overwhelming putrid smell inside the house that still exists to this day, and it's been a year. Here we are in the kitchen of the home, and there's no refrigerator right now, no stove. We still see some food here inside the house. One of the saddest things we discovered inside the home, this message, which seems to be written by one of the children. Help me, please, with what looks like a child's crying, and at the bottom, a broken heart.
Another cry for help came when a 17-year-old Turpin daughter posted video to a secret YouTube account, singing of her longing to be free.
I will not go back alive. I will stay until I die.
The videos were made in this laundry room. The house went into foreclosure, and yesterday it was sold at auction. There were 42 bids, and despite its notoriety and the squalor inside, it fetched $310,360. The buyer has not been identified, but probably knew the home's history.
The law isn't always specific. It's kind of a general requirement that you reveal important things about a house. But good grief, if it's a house of horrors where two monster parents kept 13 kids captive, that's what you have to reveal.
The 6 minor Turpin children were placed in foster homes. The 7 adults are in assisted living. As they start their new lives, their house remains full of memories of the years they spent there, years of so much pain and degradation.
Support us by subscribing to this channel. Hit the notification bell icon so you won't miss our latest videos.
August 2014, Blackstone, Massachusetts. A 10-year-old boy runs home, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Mom, I need you to come now. There's a baby crying and I don't know what to do." Betsy Brown doesn't hesitate. She walks across the street to her neighbor's house, expecting something ordinary, a fussy child, a tired mother, perhaps nothing at all. What she finds instead will haunt her forever. The moment she opens the door, she stops. The smell is overpowering, thick and rancid, clinging to her skin. She steps inside and freezes. Trash is piled in every corner. The walls are smeared with filth. Flies swarm over rotting food. And then she hears it. A soft, fragile sound. A cry. Her legs carry her forward almost against her will. In the back of the house, she finds them, 2 little girls. One, barely 3 years old, sits silently on a mattress, rocking back and forth, her body too weak to hold itself steady. The other, an infant, lies in a crib, her cries fading into exhaustion, her tiny frame caked in filth. Betsy's hands shake as she dials 911. The words catch in her throat, but she manages to get them out. "You need to come now." What she doesn't know is that the nightmare she's just uncovered is only the beginning. This isn't just a story about a house in disrepair. What investigators will find inside will defy comprehension. Secrets buried so deep that even those closest to the family claim they had no idea. What happened in this house, and how did it go unnoticed for so long? The answers would shake an entire community to its core. When officers arrived at the house on St. Paul Street, they could hardly believe what greeted them. The smell hit them first, so foul it clung to their uniforms and filled their lungs. Trash, rotting food, and diapers littered every surface, forming mounds that reached knee-high in some rooms. Flies buzzed incessantly, maggots wriggled in corners, and rodents scurried boldly across the floors. The home was unrecognizable as a place meant for human life. Windows were sealed with tattered blankets, leaving the interior shrouded in an eerie darkness. But the true horror wasn't in the filth, it was in the people still living there. 4 children were found in the house that day: a 13-year-old girl, a 10-year-old boy, a 3-year-old toddler, and an infant just 6 months old. The younger girls were discovered in a back room, their frail bodies covered in dirt and feces. The toddler was so malnourished she couldn't sit upright without help, while the infant's flattened head bore signs of being left lying in the same position for far too long. What kind of life had these children endured, and how had no one noticed their suffering until now? Authorities worked quickly to remove the children from the home, but their initial investigation only scratched the surface. As they moved deeper into the house, they opened one closet and made a discovery that would haunt them forever: the skeletal remains of 3 infants. Who were these babies? How long had they been hidden in the darkness of that closet? For the residents of Blackstone, the news was almost too horrifying to believe. The house that they'd driven past every day, the family that had seemed unremarkable at best, was suddenly the center of a nightmare. And at the heart of it all was Erica Murray, a woman whose past, neighbors soon learned, carried secrets no one could have imagined. Who was Erica Murray? How did she end up in this house of horrors, and why didn't anyone see the warning signs? The answers would be pieced together slowly, unraveling a story of isolation, secrecy, and unthinkable neglect that would leave the community shaken and a nation demanding answers. Erica Murray was, by most accounts, an unremarkable figure in Blackstone. She grew up in a modest home in southern Worcester County, Massachusetts. Her childhood seemed ordinary enough: a close-knit family, parents who worked hard, and a neighborhood where children played freely. As a little girl, Erica was bright-eyed and eager, described as happy and charming by those who knew her. Her father, Kevin, worked as a mechanic, often fixing things around the house, while her mother, Sharon, embraced homemaking with a passion for crafts. The family's small-town life was punctuated by backyard barbecues and community gatherings. But as Erica grew older, the cracks began to show. By her teenage years, she had become consumed with her appearance. Hair perfectly styled, nails always manicured. On the surface, she seemed like any other teenager trying to find her place in the world. But behind the polished exterior, there were signs of growing insecurities. At 18, Erica's life took a turn she wasn't prepared for. While working at a fast food restaurant, she met Raymond Rivera, a man 7 years her senior. Their relationship started out as one of mutual affection. He was kind, understanding, even protective. But over time, that protectiveness morphed into something far more controlling. By the summer of 2001, Erica found herself facing a life-altering reality. She was pregnant. For an 18-year-old, the thought of navigating high school graduation while visibly expecting was overwhelming. She confided in a close friend who urged her to attend the ceremony, but her shame lingered. That July, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Kayla. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. Erica, Raymond, and their baby moved in with Erica's parents, hoping to build a life together. But as the years passed, the pressures mounted. Another child came in 2003, and the family soon outgrew Erica's childhood home. They moved to Blackstone, settling into a modest house with Raymond's sister. On the surface, it appeared that Erica had carved out a stable life for her family. Social media posts painted the picture of a loving mother, birthday celebrations, home-cooked meals, and smiling children. To anyone looking in, Erica was managing. But appearances, as they say, can be deceiving. How does a woman go from a seemingly happy childhood to raising children in unimaginable conditions? What happened in those years between the joyous family photos and the horrors that lay behind closed doors? The answers wouldn't come easily. Neighbors described Erica as reclusive, rarely venturing beyond the walls of her home. Her once meticulous appearance gave way to baggy clothes and unkempt hair. Friends and family noticed the shift, but attributed it to embarrassment over a messy house. No one knew the truth. Had Erica been trapped by circumstance, overwhelmed by mental illness, or had she simply stopped caring altogether? As the investigation unfolded, Erica's past would come under scrutiny, revealing not just the choices she had made, but also the isolation and fear that may have fueled them. The discovery inside Erica Murray's home was just the beginning. For investigators, stepping into the house on St. Paul Street felt like entering a nightmare that couldn't possibly be real. The stench alone was unbearable, a potent mix of decay, rot, and neglect that clung to their clothes long after they left. The house itself was a maze of filth. Trash and soiled diapers created towering piles in every room. Maggots wriggled through layers of waste, while rodents darted through the debris as if they owned the place. Human waste was smeared on the walls, and baby bottles filled with spoiled milk sat forgotten on countertops. It was a scene that defied comprehension. A home where life had been swallowed by squalor. But the true horror wasn't in the filth, it was in the secrets the house held. During a second, more thorough search, investigators opened one closet and froze. Inside were the skeletal remains of an infant, wrapped in adult sweatpants. A closer look revealed something chilling. The umbilical cord and placenta were still attached. It seemed as though the baby had been born, abandoned, and left to die. The search didn't end there. In another closet, they found the remains of 2 more infants, hidden among the clutter. How long had these tiny bodies been there? Weeks, months, years? The advanced state of decomposition made it nearly impossible to tell. Who were these children? How did they come to be buried in the shadows of their own home? Investigators turned to Erica Murray for answers, but what they found instead were half-truths and contradictions. At first, she denied knowing anything about the remains, but as evidence mounted, her story shifted. She admitted to giving birth in secret, delivering the babies in her bathtub while her family slept. Why would a mother hide her pregnancies? What kind of fear or desperation drives someone to such extremes? Erica claimed that one of the babies had been stillborn, and in her panic she had hidden the body. When questioned about the others, she said one infant had lived for a week before passing away, but she never called for help. "I was scared," she told investigators. "I didn't know what to do." Her explanations raised more questions than they answered. Was she paralyzed by fear, or had she made a conscious choice to let those babies die? As authorities worked to untangle the truth, another troubling question emerged. Where was Raymond Rivera in all of this? Raymond, Erica's partner of over a decade and the father of her children, claimed he had no idea that she'd given birth to more children. He insisted he wasn't aware of the 2 young girls living in the home, nor did he know about the infants hidden in the closets. How could someone share a home and a life with Erica and remain oblivious to so much? Was Raymond complicit, or was he truly in the dark? As neighbors and acquaintances came forward, the puzzle deepened. Some spoke of a foul odor emanating from the house, dismissed at the time as nothing more than poor housekeeping. Others recalled the children's unusual behavior, the older ones keeping to themselves, the younger ones never seen at all. A postal worker noted that the house always seemed disheveled, with signs of neglect visible from the outside. Had the warning signs been there all along, and if so, why hadn't anyone acted sooner? The investigation would dig into every corner of Erica and Raymond's lives, uncovering failures that spanned years and left devastating consequences in their wake. As investigators pieced together the grim puzzle of Erica Murray's home, the questions only deepened. The skeletal remains of 3 infants, the malnourished and neglected children, the squalor. It painted a picture almost too horrific to believe. But how had it come to this? Forensic teams examined the infants' remains, hoping for answers. One set of bones told a particularly haunting story. The baby appeared to have been born alive. The umbilical cord and placenta were still attached, and the positioning of the tiny body suggested it had died shortly after birth. The cause? It could have been neglect, abandonment, or a lack of medical care. Truths buried in time. The medical examiner, however, couldn't confirm exactly when or how the infants had died. The advanced state of decomposition left more questions than answers. Had these babies been alive for hours, days, weeks? And if they had, why hadn't anyone intervened? Erica's confessions painted a chilling picture. She admitted to delivering the babies alone in the dead of night, using her bathtub as a makeshift delivery room. She claimed the pregnancies were kept secret out of fear that Raymond Rivera, her partner, would leave her if he discovered the truth. But was it fear, or was it something else? Erica explained that after each birth she was overcome with panic. She couldn't call for help, she couldn't tell anyone, and so she made a choice to hide the newborns, to place their tiny bodies in closets as though they were things to be forgotten. What drives a mother to such a decision? Was it desperation, shame, or something darker? DNA test confirmed the truth. All 7 children, those alive and those lost, belonged to Erica and Raymond. But when Raymond was confronted with the results, his response shocked even seasoned investigators. He denied knowing about the 2 younger girls. He denied knowing about the infants. He denied everything. How could a father share a home with 7 children and claim to know only 2 of them? The investigators pressed further. They found that Raymond spent much of his time in the basement, where he tended to a small marijuana growing operation. Did his absence from the family's main living space give Erica the freedom to hide the truth? Or was he turning a blind eye to something he didn't want to confront? Neighbors described Raymond as polite but distant, a man who kept to himself. At work, he appeared neat and professional with photos of Erica and their 2 older children on his desk. But behind the surface of his carefully maintained life, something didn't add up. One coworker recalled Raymond confiding about problems at home, hygiene issues, financial struggles. He'd mentioned them in passing, but never in detail. Had he truly been unaware of the horrors inside his own home, or was he just unwilling to face them? The more investigators uncovered, the more complicated the story became. Neighbors remembered foul odors and unusual behavior, but no one had acted. Child Welfare Services had visited the home in 2007 after receiving complaints about the living conditions, yet no action was taken. Why had the system failed these children? As the investigation unfolded, the hidden truths of Erica Murray's life came into focus. They revealed a woman overwhelmed, isolated, and buried under the weight of her own decisions. But also a woman who had the opportunity to seek help and chose not to. How many times could this tragedy have been stopped? How many lives could have been saved? These were the questions that would haunt investigators, neighbors, and the entire Blackstone community for years to come. The trial of Erica Murray began in June 2019, nearly 5 years after the horrifying discoveries in her Blackstone home. By then, the small town had long since shed its anonymity, its name forever tied to the case that left an entire community reeling. But for many, the trial offered hope, a chance to finally understand how such a tragedy could have unfolded and to hold someone accountable for the lives that had been lost and shattered. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, heavy with anticipation. Erica Murray, once described as a cheerful, ambitious young woman, sat expressionless. The prosecution wasted no time painting a grim picture of her home as a house of horrors, a phrase that by now had become synonymous with her name. Prosecutors argued that Erica had knowingly subjected her children to years of neglect. They described how piles of garbage had replaced furniture, how rodents had roamed freely, and how the younger children had been left to survive in isolation and filth. But the most damning accusation was their claim that at least one of the infants had been born alive and had died because Erica failed to seek help. What kind of mother, they asked, could let this happen? To counter these claims, Erica's defense attorney, Keith Halpern, presented a different narrative, one of mental illness and emotional isolation. He argued that Erica suffered from severe personality disorders, including avoidant and dependent tendencies, which left her incapable of comprehending the gravity of her actions. Halpern painted her not as a villain, but as a victim, a woman trapped by her own mind and paralyzed by fear. He suggested that Erica's decisions, though horrific, were not born of malice, but of desperation and untreated mental illness. Could it be possible, he asked, that Erica genuinely believed she was doing the best she could? But the prosecution wasn't convinced. They called witnesses to the stand, neighbors, investigators, and medical experts, who detailed the shocking conditions of the home and the suffering endured by the children. One of the most emotional moments came when Betsy Brown, the neighbor who first discovered the horrors, described what she had seen that day. Her voice broke as she recounted the toddler rocking back and forth on a filthy mattress, the infant lying in filth, and the overwhelming stench that made it hard to breathe. She told the court how she had called 911 that day, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. How could anyone live like this? How could no one have stepped in sooner? The defense called forensic psychologists to support their case, describing Erica as a woman who had been emotionally and psychologically manipulated by her partner, Raymond Rivera. They argued that Raymond's controlling nature had left Erica isolated and overwhelmed, but prosecutors pushed back, pointing out that Erica had maintained a meticulous online presence, sharing cheerful updates and pictures of her older children while concealing the reality of her home life. Was this the behavior of a woman too paralyzed to act, or someone capable of deception? As the trial unfolded, it became clear that the case wasn't just about Erica Murray. It was about systemic failures, about how Child Welfare Services had visited the home years earlier but hadn't intervened, about how neighbors had noticed the smell and the disorder but hadn't reported it, and about how Raymond Rivera had shared the house yet claimed ignorance of its horrors. By the time closing arguments were made, the jury was left with more questions than answers. Was Erica Murray a neglectful mother who knowingly allowed her children to suffer? Or was she a deeply troubled woman, unfit to handle the responsibilities of parenthood? The verdict would be a reflection of those unanswered questions. Erica was acquitted of the second-degree murder charges, as the court found insufficient evidence to prove she had caused the deaths of the infants. However, she was found guilty of 2 counts of assault and battery on a child and 2 counts of animal cruelty. The judge, acknowledging the disturbing nature of the case, also noted Erica's mental health issues and the lack of definitive evidence against her. In July 2019, she was sentenced to 6 to 8 years in prison with credit for the nearly 5 years she had already served. For some, the sentence felt far too lenient. For others, it was a reminder of how complicated justice can be. But one question lingered in the minds of everyone who had followed the case. Had the system failed yet again to protect those who couldn't protect themselves? When the verdict was announced, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Erica Murray, found guilty of assault and battery on a child as well as animal cruelty, would serve 6 to 8 years in prison, but with nearly 5 years already served while awaiting trial, her remaining time behind bars would be brief. For many, the punishment felt hollow. Could a few short years in prison ever account for the horrors her children endured, for the lives that were lost and the questions that remained unanswered? As Erica was led away in handcuffs, the weight of her actions lingered in the room. Judge Janet Kenton Walker, in delivering the sentence, had acknowledged the unspeakable nature of the case. But she had also pointed out the legal limitations. There simply wasn't enough evidence to prove that Erica had caused the infants' deaths. And yet, even the judge's words couldn't quiet the outcry from the community. Blackstone residents, still grappling with the revelations of the House of Horrors, struggled to make sense of it all. How had the signs gone unnoticed for so long? How had the system failed to protect the most vulnerable? The aftermath of the case rippled far beyond the courtroom. The Murray home, once a nondescript house on a quiet street, had been condemned and demolished. Its foundation, contaminated by years of neglect, was dug out and leveled. Nothing remained but an empty lot, a void that mirrored the scars left on the community. But what of the children who had survived? The 13-year-old girl and 10-year-old boy who had lived in the house for years carried with them the physical and emotional wounds of their ordeal. Both were found to have severe ear infections, maggot infestations, and developmental delays caused by neglect. And then there were the 2 younger girls, the 3-year-old and the 6-month-old, whose lives had hung by a thread when they were rescued. The toddler was so malnourished she couldn't sit upright without help, her tiny body trembling from weakness. The infant, her head flattened from being left in one position for too long, was too fragile to even cry properly. The road to recovery would be long and uncertain. Initially placed in foster care, the children's futures remained a point of contention. Reports suggested that the 2 older children were placed under the guardianship of Raymond Rivera's family, but the younger girls faced a different fate, moving between foster homes as authorities searched for a more permanent solution. How does a child rebuild after enduring such trauma? Can they ever truly heal? For the Blackstone community, closure felt impossible. Vigils were held on the empty lot where the Murray home once stood. Flowers, balloons, and stuffed animals were left in tribute to the children who had suffered within its walls, and to the 3 lives that never had a chance to begin. The case also sparked broader conversations about the failures of child welfare systems. In 2007, the Department of Children and Families had investigated the Murray household after complaints about its condition. But their visits yielded no action and the case was closed. How different might things have been if intervention had come sooner? Even years after Erica's sentencing, those questions remain unanswered. The House of Horrors may be gone, but the lessons it left behind are far from forgotten. What does justice truly look like in cases like these? And how can society ensure that the most vulnerable among us are never abandoned to suffer in silence again? The story of the House of Horrors didn't end with Erica Murray's sentencing. It continued to echo in the minds of those who lived in Blackstone, in the files of caseworkers who had failed to intervene, and in the hearts of anyone who heard the tragic tale. It was a story that left behind more questions than answers, a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of inaction. For the people of Blackstone, the house had become a symbol of unimaginable failure. Neighbors who had passed it every day began to question themselves. Could they have done more? Was there something, anything they had overlooked? One resident spoke of a faint odor that would waft from the house on summer evenings. Another recalled seeing children occasionally in the yard, but never the 2 youngest girls. A postal worker mentioned the disheveled state of the home, but brushed it off as untidiness. How often do we dismiss the little signs that something might be wrong? The Department of Children and Families, too, came under scrutiny. The 2007 investigation had been an opportunity to intervene, but it ended without action. Authorities claimed they found no clear evidence of neglect at the time, yet the conditions in the house suggested otherwise. How had such glaring red flags gone unnoticed? And then there was Raymond Rivera. His claims of ignorance, his insistence that he didn't know about the 2 younger girls or the infants hidden in the closets, left many shaking their heads in disbelief. He shared a home with Erica, shared a life with her. Could he really have been so blind to the horrors unfolding under his own roof? Or was his silence a choice? Forensic psychologists who examined Erica described a woman overwhelmed by mental illness, trapped in a cycle of fear and secrecy. They argued that her personality disorders and untreated postpartum depression had clouded her judgment, rendering her unable to seek help. But was that explanation enough? The prosecution had painted a much darker picture. A mother who actively concealed her pregnancies, abandoned her newborns, and allowed her surviving children to suffer in unimaginable conditions. A woman who, despite her mental health struggles, had the presence of mind to maintain an online persona that painted her as a doting, loving mother. What then was the truth about Erica Murray? For the children who survived, the story didn't end with their rescue, it began. The 3-year-old, once so weak she couldn't sit upright, had to relearn what it meant to live in a safe, nurturing environment. The infant, whose cries had barely been a whisper, faced an uphill battle to overcome developmental delays caused by months of neglect. Would they ever truly escape the shadows of their past? As the years passed, the spotlight faded. Erica was released from prison, Raymond served his time, the House of Horrors was demolished, leaving behind nothing but a patch of grass on a quiet street. But for the people of Blackstone, the story remains a wound that never fully healed. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of silence, the cracks in the systems meant to protect the vulnerable, and the power of complacency to let horrors flourish in plain sight. How many more houses like this exist, unnoticed and unchecked? And how do we as a society ensure that the most innocent among us are never left to suffer in the dark again?